All right, welcome back to the Outdoor Adventures podcast. Today in the studio, special guest, Bryant. And I'm not going to say your last name because you're just Bryant.
Yeah, and I don't like people to know my last name.
Well, that worked out.
It's a big secret.
We didn't even talk about that ahead of time.
No, we didn't.
We're keeping it quiet.
I also just made that up on the spot. If you didn't pick that up. So,
Well, Bryant is with the Oregon Hunting and Fishing podcast.
Yep.
And he also manages a fishing and hunting club, Salem First Hunting and Fishing. So it's Oregon First Hunting and Fishing podcast and Salem First Hunting and Fishing Club.
Yeah, not to rub it in your face or anything, but if you type in Oregon Hunting, my show shows up before yours.
Nice. There you go. Well, it helps when you have Oregon in the title. And you have found yourself in front of a lot of cool guests. I enjoy your podcast. I've been listening since I met you. And we met each other through Jay Yellis. And he's like, hey, you have a podcast? These guys have a podcast. Go talk to these guys.
Yeah,
you know?
Yeah, for sure.
And have gotten to know you kind of slowly through that process.
And that was only about a year ago.
Yeah.
I think it was last summer. I feel like we've really, kind of built a friendship since then, so it's been great.
Yeah, no, you're a great guy. And just this guy, don't know him that well, takes me out turkey hunting. I've never turkey hunted.
That was great.
And that was...
See, that was the beginning of a beautiful friendship.
Yeah, I listened to you gobbling. We sat across each other at the Sportsman Show, and he was doing different calls.
Oh, yeah. Trying to call them
people.
in.
Yeah, calling
in
people.
It would work, too.
Yeah,
because we were sitting back there in the back corner by the bow rack, so everyone wanted to go talk to Wayne Endicott. They didn't really care about us.
Right.
So I do the turkey call, and people poke their head around the corner. Like, oh, there's podcast people here. And we were the only two podcast shows at the show. Everyone else was just trying to sell you something, barbecue sauce or whatever. So I felt like we provided something important that day.
Yeah, and we stole your kind of call to action. You kept going, do you listen to podcasts? They're free.
Yeah, free. Exactly. Sign up, free show.
Yeah. So that was fun, and we got to spend some quality, 3 days hanging around each other there.
Yep, and then we went turkey hunting. You can't forget the bass fishing either. When you, me, and Kyle Duver, we all went out on the kayaks at your pond, and that was a fun day.
That was fun. I listened to your podcast with Kyle, and I really thought he was going to outfish us, and I think he probably did by the end of the day.
Yeah,
but he started a little slow,
and he was also a little private about it. He'd get a fish in and release it, and then I would hear a splash and look, and he's like, "Got one." I'm like, "Dude, come on, let me see the fish." I guess he wanted to show us a monster. He was throwing back all those normal, 2 to 3 pound, which for me, I mean, a 3-pound bass is legendary.
Yeah.
But when I fished with you that day, that's when I got the bug for topwater. I couldn't put the frog down. And so ever since then, all summer long, I've just been beating that frog, man, just frog fishing all day long and not getting a bite. I did go fishing with Kyle again after that at a different private pond out of Kaiser, Oregon, and was throwing a frog, and it was getting dark, and I caught a nice 3.5 pounder.
Nice.
And so that was the satisfaction I needed, because after all those trips of not getting any frog catches, I was getting plenty of frog bites, but man, I was stoked about that fish.
That frog catching, the frog bite, there's nothing like the frog bite. When you throw that frog in the right spot and that explosion happens, you just get, and they all look huge. You think, oh, this is a 7-pound bass for sure, and they hammer it, and then half the time you pull it out too soon, and then the other half the time you wait too long, and then there's no fish.
And then 1% of the time you might get lucky. And one thing Kyle told me about that is the bigger the splash, usually the smaller the fish, it seems like.
Oh.
Because some of those, and it was true when I got mine, there was, a good 3.5. There's some people who are out there catching 5 to 7 pound bass all day long. But I mean, and here in Oregon, a 10 pounder is a once in a lifetime fish. We just don't catch those. But so for me to catch a 3.5 pounder, I was super excited about that. But the thing just kind of slurped it. It wasn't really like a huge jump out of the water or anything. It was a little splash and set the hook.
And maybe that's the bigger fish are more mature, and so they're not attacking the prey as much, or they're
just sucking
more
it in.
Seasoned. You know?
But the one thing I learned, which this is a tip if anyone's frustrated about the frog bite. So I fished at your place for the whole day, and I had fluorocarbon on. And I fished and fished with that frog, and I could never set the hook. I got so many strikes, I could never set the hook on the frog. And then I fished a whole another day after that with on the other private pond with the frog and fluorocarbon line. Could not set the hook. I finally got frustrated because everyone says you need to use braided line for frogs because there's no stretch. And so I just unspooled my whole reel, threw on some 50-pound braid because you want to cut through lily pads supposedly. And it was 3 casts after that I hooked into that fish. So there's something to be said about using braided line on a frog because the stretch isn't there and you can way more effectively set the hook on that.
See, and that's just dumb luck for me because I've always fished with braid with frogs.
Oh, yeah.
Just randomly. It was just like, oh, this seems to make sense.
You have the instinct of a killer, Sam.
Yeah.
That's what it is.
Yeah, that's what it is. And it was a floating line, so it just made sense to me to throw out a floating braid. And what's crazy is I've gotten worse at frog fishing. When I first started, felt like my takedown to hook set ratio was much better, and maybe I was just beginner's luck or something.
Yeah.
But I'd have
delayed reaction.
Yeah, maybe 4 frog bites and go 3 for 4. And or 5 frog bites and go 4 for 5. And now it's like 1 for 6 kind of.
Oh, yeah. So. Which I think I've caught 1 on a frog. And so I can't even count how many hits that's missed, but Well,
I haven't really been. Fun. I didn't fish much since that time actually. So I went out fishing with you guys that time. I haven't bass fished again. I did go steelhead fishing twice. So recently, in the last couple of weeks, we went out steelhead fishing to my old steelhead hole on the South Santiam River, and the counts have been terrible for the last 5 to 10 years. So I haven't even bothered going. I was just like, the 400 fish for a whole season, I'm not going to mess with that. You know?
It's rough.
But this year, they'd already had something like 2,500 fish come in. And back when I used to fish it as a kid, it was like 3,000 to 5,000 was what you would typically on a good summer.
That's when you'd go.
Yeah. And, anywhere from June to August generally for summer steelhead.
That's a pretty long time there. I didn't realize. I thought it was more specific than that. That's a pretty long run.
I mean, for me, my brother's birthday is June 25th, and I always like to go send a picture of a steelhead on his birthday to him and just be like, hey, I caught a fish today. Happy birthday.
Yeah.
And so I did that like 3 years in a row.
And where does your brother live?
Around here.
Oh, so you didn't want to take him fishing on his birthday. You just wanted to send him a picture.
Yeah, just mess with him a little bit. But
such a nice brother.
So you always got to look. He's my younger brother. They're all younger
that makes
than
a lot
me.
of sense. I'm an oldest child, so I get that.
Me too. You gotta pick on those other siblings.
You gotta flick them some crap.
Exactly.
Yep.
So I would always catch my first steelhead June 25th, and then usually by July I was done. But occasionally I'd catch some fish in August. Like early August.
Okay.
But anyway, we go and fish this hole. Nothing's really happening. There's only like a couple other guys there, which is unusual. Normally this spot has 15 to 20 guys fishing at it.
Yeah.
And, in the long time ago. Mm-hmm. So I ended up hooking a fish, and it was fighting pretty good, and I'm using like 6-pound leader. And
oh, really?
Yeah, and it's peeling line, and I'm nursing it down river so I can beach it, But I don't want to, springers, when you hook a springer, when you catch a steelhead, they'll go crazy up and down the river. They'll jump.
Yeah.
But a springer will just hold. They just go straight down at the bottom and they hunker.
Oh.
Generally.
Because they're bigger or what? Just the way they swim?
Just how they seem to react in the river. They go to the deepest part, and that's just what they do. And you can feel the strength. So I knew right away it was a salmon. But I slowly worked it in, and we ended up landing him. And, got a fish to share with everybody. So that was cool.
And you said it cut good because you showed me the picture, and the fish, you could tell it was close to spawn.
Yeah, it was a little dark.
It was a little dark, but it cut well, you said.
Yeah, the springers, they get dark pretty quick too. But they always typically cut good. I mean, it looked a little like faded. And my buddies, Kyler and Josh, were with me, and they were like, is this going to taste good? But then we all ate it that night, and I thought it tasted good.
How'd you cook it?
I did real basic, like garlic, salt, and lemon pepper, and just kind of fried it in a frying pan.
Oh, okay. Nice. Stovetop then, huh?
Yeah, stovetop.
Sweet. Yeah.
Made the whole house smell like fish,
Oh, I'm sure the wife loved that.
She loves that. Yeah.
She liked to eat salmon?
She does, yeah. Good. I mean, she likes salmon.
It's kind of the fish that most people like. Like if people don't like fish, they'll usually make an exception for salmon. Something about it.
Yeah, and they tell us all these health benefits of it too. So that makes you want to eat it.
Yeah, all the time, right?
Yeah.
It's good for the heart and all, whatever they say.
And you've been all over the place. I've been listening to your show. You've been traveling down south quite a bit to Southern Oregon.
Yeah, well, because from doing a podcast, that's where all the cool people are. There's none of them up. I do have one guest. I'm going to be going next week up to Tigard, and that'll be my first time ever going north. Okay. Everyone else I've recorded has either been local to our area or, Roseburg, Medford. I was just in Winchester Bay, Reedsport, interviewing someone last couple weekends ago. But, it's, kind of all over the place down there.
Did you see the Reedsport elk herd when you were going through there?
I did not. Nope. I didn't see any elk or anything.
They're always right there off of the road.
Off the 101? Mm-hmm. Yeah, I don't know. It was a little foggy when we went down. So I had stuff going on the night before, so I went to bed at midnight, and then I had to wake up at 5 to do the trip. And then I drove and I picked up Kyle, and we drove all the way down to Reedsport and had breakfast with Little Dave from Little Dave's Baits. His name's Dave Kniebel, and he custom pours swim baits for bass fishing. Striper fishing is kind of his main clientele. Most of the striper guides down in Reedsport use his baits. And so that's kind of the brand, the name he's made for himself is amongst striper fishermen. So it was really cool because he was really gracious and a great host. He took us down there, showed us where to get the best breakfast burritos in town and the tackle shop there. Man, I really wish I could remember the name of it off the top of my head. Salmon Harbor Mercantile and Tackle Shop. But they, for free, let us record there, use their space. It was really nice. And then, we bought some burritos there. But if you're looking for striper baits, go to that tackle shop and they'll hook you up with some Little Dave's baits. And then we fished for 9 hours. And Dave has a fish finder on his boat. So we were marking fish all day. As soon as that tide started coming in, we're going up in the river and finding these holes there'd be 50 fish stacked on top of each other. But in the daylight, they just did not want to bite. And so we're fishing hard all day long. Finally, at about 4 p.m., I think it was, the tide had come in so far that this place that was above water when we started was now about 5 or 6 feet underwater, huge tide swing. And we fished there for a while, and I hooked into a nice, about 5-pound striper. And that was my first striper ever. I had never caught one before, and man, that thing could fight. For a 5-pound fish, both Dave, who's caught a lot of them, and Kyle, who catches a ton of bass, we were all swearing up and down it was an 8-pounder. Yeah. And then we put it on the scale, and it's 5 pounds, and we're just blown away that a fish that size could fight so hard. But they are saltwater fish, Yeah,
and pound for pound, bass in general are really good fighters, are known for that.
Especially river smallmouth, man. But that striper really lit a fire in me. And I was telling you before you started recording, I'm definitely a striper addict now, and I've already got a trip planned to go back and do some night fishing because supposedly it's best at night. Yeah. And so I'm excited about that.
So if you need a stowaway for that trip, you just call me.
All right.
I'm ready to go.
Sounds good.
Striper fishing, I've never done it. I've always wanted to do it. And in Oregon, we just don't, it's not a really common fish that people fish for.
No, we only have them really in a couple of estuaries. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I think there's some on the Umpqua River too, maybe, or they come in the mouth or something. But it's not a huge fishery in Oregon at all.
No.
Compared to, there's spots in California and then on the East Coast.
Yeah, the Sacramento River in California is a hot spot. And then they're actually native in the East Coast. They're not from the West Coast. And so they do a lot. And it's kind of funny because I'll read stuff on the East Coast about the populations kind of suffering and people are worried about them. But then out here on the West Coast where they're not native, they're doing fairly well, and they're actually spreading. There's been a few of them caught in the Willamette River, which is really surprising for one, how far upstream that is, and for two, most of them are down like Reedsport area rather than up north.
Yeah, I'd love to catch one. That's always kind of been a bucket list fish for me.
Yeah.
And when my wife was sick and we were in San Francisco, I would try to catch stripers. Mm-hmm. So I watched a couple of YouTubes of these guys catching stripers with these big lures and throwing them out there. And I'm like, that's really close to my hotel. I know that spot.
Nice.
So then I'd go down there and I'd try and nothing. I could never get a strike. But
Yeah, like I said, 9 hours of fishing, we took in one fish, but we were fishing during the day, and supposedly, like, we didn't see another guide out there the whole day because the guides are strictly night fishing, and that's just kind of when you got to go for the stripers. But, you know, I don't have any room for stowaways on this trip, but let's plan a trip down there and try to get into some. I know Kyle would love to go too, and, you know, show us what to do.
Yeah, well, Kyle's a great fisherman too, and he pours his own baits too.
He does.
He used to buy all of his stuff from Little Dave, and then Little Dave stopped doing some of it, so Kyle had to do it. Isn't that?
Bought some of the molds, and so then Kyle started doing his own, and I've caught some fish on some Kyle lures. Yeah. Some Kyle, he does a lot of stick worms and stuff like that for bass, and so
that's kind of next level fishing when you're making your own lures, you know?
Yeah, when you're tying your own lures, it's like, you know that you're in it. You're addicted.
Well, and while we're talking about fishing, Brent Norlander, who you know as well, I talked to him the other day, and I hadn't talked to him in a while. He's been doing this obscure fishing, kind of similar, like the same vein here. He's been fly fishing for carp on the Columbia.
Oh, yeah.
And then also he went up to Washington for, I want to say muskies.
Muskies?
Yeah, so some obscure fishing that a lot of people don't think it. Yeah. Northwest. I mean, carp, I guess, are everywhere probably. But the muskie one was intriguing.
Well, the fly fishing for carp, I've only heard of a few people doing that.
He said it's a kick when you get one. You know?
I'm sure, because I've caught them on conventional, and those suckers can fight.
Yeah.
Like, you wouldn't think of it because it's a carp. No one wants to eat them except for, you know, immigrants, I guess, like to eat them, and they should teach us how to cook them. But, you know, the fly fishing or conventional fishing for carp, those things will run. It's surprising.
Well, yeah, I remember the only other guy that talked to me about eating a carp was a homeless guy. So I was down there fishing for him as a kid, and he told me the key is if you get one, you take it home in your bathtub for 3 days and you let it spit all that gunk out.
You flush it out?
Yeah, you flush it out. But I was kind of, in my head as like a 12-year-old kid, I'm going, how does a homeless guy know about this bathtub technique when, like, what bathtub is he talking about? You know? But anyway.
You were thinking ahead even as a kid.
Yeah, I wasn't going to eat it. We've always used them as crab bait generally.
The carp are good for that?
Yeah, I mean, crab will eat anything.
Yeah, I just feel like you do a lot of the shad fishing, which you invited me this year, but I couldn't go. That they're a pretty stinky fish.
Very oily, very stinky. Yeah, carp probably not as stinky, I wouldn't think.
But they're still good crab bait.
I mean, I have found success with crab with just about anything. You know, I mean, they're not that particular.
I actually had crab for dinner tonight.
I have a bad crab bait story, but I'm going to go ahead and tell it.
Okay.
So I was a fish and wildlife major in college. I'm living in Newport at the Hatfield Science Center, and we crabbed in the evenings, and we were planning for this big party that we were doing all the cooking for all the professors down there. So we got some abalone out of the abalone tanks, and we'd gotten permission to do it, you know.
Because you can't harvest those in Oregon.
Yeah, so these were aquaculture abalone, and we'd gotten some given to us from one of the professors.
Yeah.
And then we were catching crab, and we were just keeping them live in a live tank to plan for this party. So one night we needed crab bait. And, you know, being resourceful young college kids, we're driving along the road, and I'm like, oh, there's some roadkill. We should grab it for crab bait. Not knowing what it was. You know, and now in Oregon, we do have the roadkill harvest thing. But I was kind of half joking when I said it, you know. And my buddy pulls over, and he had this old C9 Jeep, and he runs out, and he grabs whatever it was and throws it in the back. And I don't think anything of it. I didn't even ask. And we get back to the dorms, and I'm like, what was that? And he's like, oh, it was domestic cat.
Oh, man.
So he skinned this domestic cat and
he
used it for crabbing. Yeah. And it was,
man.
It was very uncomfortable for me.
Yeah. Because that's, someone's pet cat.
Yeah. No. It's not a story I'm super proud of.
Unless it was a feral cat, then you get that thing out of the streets. But
I
think people should keep their cats indoors no matter what because of what they do. But, I mean...
It was already passed away, obviously.
Sure.
It was roadkill. Yeah, we wouldn't be using, but still, I mean, so it did get repurposed as crab bait.
See, where I thought you were going was he was going to go, it's a skunk.
Yeah.
I mean, it stinks. Who knows what that would do, right?
Yeah, I would have been almost probably more comfortable with skunk than cat.
Someone try it and write it in. And then, because I want to know if skunk is good crab bait.
Let us know.
It stinks so bad. Yeah.
I can't imagine skunk work for anything in my mind. We had a skunk dead in my pasture, and my old boss is a big fly fisherman, and I sent him a picture. I go, "Do you want any of this hair,
the hair yeah.
to tie flies with?" Because it had sat out there for quite a while, and he still was like, "No, I'm good."
Yeah. Oh, really?
Yeah, I'll pass.
Yeah. One time, I had 1 year of my life. It's a very dark year that I tried fly fishing, and so I wanted to tie my own flies. I think I actually just told this story on the podcast I recorded, Little Dave. But I took a broken drill, like an old Ryobi, how do you say that brand? Battery
Ryobi,
drill.
yeah.
And I screwed the base of it onto a piece of plywood, and that was my jig for putting the hook in, my vise, and then I would tie stuff. And I was driving down, I grew up in McMinnville, driving down the road, and there was a rotten buck on the side of the road. So I jumped out, and I cut the tail off, and I put it in my Jeep because I was going to use the hair to tie flies. And then I completely forgot about it. And so like a week later, I, obviously found this rotten deer tail in my Jeep and just ended up wasting it. But,
Oh, man.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, probably not a bad thing to waste.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But that skunk fur, that'd probably be good stuff.
I'll tell you, you say the darkest year of your life. Fly fishing, my old boss loves it. I had a similar time in my youth, and I don't know if I was 14 or 15 or what, but I decided to try fly fishing.
Yeah.
And I think we were going to a lake that was fly only. So I was like, okay, I got to learn this. So I bought a rod and a reel, and I got the tippet and all the stuff, and I got everything set up. And the biggest frustration, and I started with dry flies, which is a terrible way to start, and was back to the whole frog fishing thing, the takedowns. You get all these takedowns, but couldn't set the hook. Pulling it out of their mouth, I would get so frustrated.
Yeah. So. I during that dark year of my life, I used a lot of poppers. Is kind of what I resorted to. Because, it's like a little plug of styrofoam with some feathers sticking out the back of it. Yeah, it looks like
a grasshopper or something.
And I actually caught smallmouth on the Yamhill River with them. Oh. And so that was pretty fun because, it's a topwater bite. And other than that, I caught a bunch of bluegill with wet flies, never caught any trout.
Yeah. No, it's something I'd like to go back to at some point in my, outdoorsman life, but I don't know when.
Well, for me, though, because I'm a bass fisherman, I have to hate fly fishing, and it's kind of my job. And so we do, for the Salem First Hunting and Fishing Club, we do a fishing trip every year in spring. We go to some private pond, and everyone gets to fish for bass. And we always give a prize for the biggest fish. I'll never forget the first year we did it. A kid brought a fly rod, and he was fly fishing with just a little wet fly, like a woolly bugger or something like that. And he outfished all of us. He caught more fish and the biggest fish. And we all just tucked our tails, and I handed him his prize. I was like, I can't believe, get out of here.
Is that why you hate on fly fishing now after that experience?
No, that's not why. I already had before that, but it definitely fed the flame of my passion. Yeah. No, I say all that though. I'm joking. It seems fun. I'm gonna do this big project over the next couple years called the Oregon Fishing Tour. And I've picked out 10 different species of fish and types of fishing from around the whole state of Oregon. And I'm going to make videos going from place to place, doing these cool, unique fishing trips. And one of them, I'm going to try to get my friend Nate Bailey, who runs the Life Outdoors down in Medford, Oregon, to take me out fly fishing for trout. So that'll be fun because he's a fly guide.
Yeah, the fly fishing thing, I've always respected it from a distance. Yeah. I'm sticking with conventional gear until I have time. And it's another expensive hobby if you decide to add it on. Yeah. Because then all of a sudden your cheap fly rod's not going to be good enough, and your this isn't going to be good enough. And so.
Well, you got to think of it like hunting. You could spend a lot of money getting into fly fishing. You could spend a huge amount of money. But hunting, I feel like you could spend even more between the packs and the guns or the archery equipment or whatever, binoculars and everything. The folly of a new deer hunter. And so many, I've seen this in like 3 of my friends. So they want to start hunting. They go out, they buy a full kit of Sitka and spend an exuberant amount of money. They buy the sports pack, even though they've never hunted for anything before. And they buy a brand new 6.5 Creedmoor and put the most expensive scope they could buy. And they buy Vortex binoculars and just spend all their money on it. And then it takes them 5 years to get their first buck, and they're all frustrated and mad because they spend all the money. The way to go into it is to buy used every single thing you can and buy the cheapest 30-06 you can find, and then you can be a real hunter.
And then upgrade from there.
Yep.
You know, I have mixed feelings because I was that guy. I was just whatever I had, and I used paper route money to buy my first rifle, and it was a Model 70.
Nice. That's what I hunt with to this day.
Yeah, and it was chambered in 270, and it was a good gun for me for a lot of years. But then I missed a few times with it, and so then I of course blamed the gun because it couldn't be me.
Yeah.
And I was like, well, Winchester's quality wasn't good those years, and blah blah blah. So then I went away from that gun, and I think I went to a 06 for a while, and I just went to the 6.5, not the Creedmoor, but the PRC.
Yeah, the precision rifle cartridge.
And I've been really happy with that so far. But it's
a tack driver.
I agree with you in that you don't need all the fancy stuff to go out there and be successful. It's tactics and paying attention and being patient.
Yeah,
is going to get you to success a lot faster than fancy equipment.
Yeah, and you know, starting off with whatever you can afford, used stuff. Don't drain your bank account on gear. That's one tip. But my other tip for a new hunter is don't be afraid to go by yourself. You know, I've hunted with guys where they're just learning how, they never want to go alone, and they're always relying on someone else to take them. And you know, it's great to have that help and that mentorship in the beginning, but even in the beginning, you should go by yourself and just kind of bump around in the woods and learn and figure it out the hard way. That's what separates the people who are going to continue hunting for the rest of their life from the ones who it's just going to be a convenience thing for them. Is if you're willing to go by yourself. That's a big difference maker.
Especially with Onyx, because when I was a kid, you took a compass bearing before you left camp, and you had a couple of big things to pay attention to, and then you made sure you didn't get yourself too far that you couldn't get back. And I'd been lost a few times in the snow, especially, but just because everything looks so different. But once you learn a few drainages and where you're at, you can usually make your way back. But with Onyx, I don't know how you get lost.
Well, and you were hunting the Cascades in those days?
I was over east, like the
East
Ochicos.
side. Oh, way east. So for me, when I first started hunting, it was also before Onyx, you know, when we had paper tags and everything. But I didn't ever have any maps. I didn't know who owned what land. I would just drive up into the woods and park at the first gate, and as long as it wasn't posted no trespassing, I would just go in and walk around all day without a map. And there was a few times I'd walk further than I thought, get lost. But luckily in the Coast Range, it's pretty easy. If you head downhill long enough, you're going to hit a logging road, and you can just walk out.
You just hope it connects to something.
Yeah, there's been a few times where you go down some, 3-mile long spur road and you got to climb out of a canyon. Those aren't the funnest days, but it could build your character.
Memorable, though.
Yeah. But Onyx usually avoids that problem nowadays.
Yeah, for sure.
Yep.
So now that we've kind of transitioned into hunting, it is hunting season coming up. So we've got
soon.
Bow season starts, September or August 31st?
August 31st.
So, and we're August 13th today?
About 2 weeks away.
Yeah. So are you getting excited about that?
Oh, yeah. I've been shooting my bow a ton. My motto is a quiver a day. So I have 20 yards set up in my backyard. I know I'm not supposed to, but, I live in the city, but whatever.
Well, I've seen where your house is at. I feel like that's probably a pretty safe spot,
Yeah. I wish I had a better backstop. But luckily, I'm to the point where I hit the target every time. So the first year I went through a lot of plywood behind the target. But nowadays, it's a lot cleaner of a shot. I've been practicing my calls and getting ready to go back out to it. This year is unique because it's my first year archery hunting blacktail. And as much as we talked about fishing, my main sport, what I love to do is blacktail hunting. That's what's in my blood. That's what I started on, and can never shake that passion for blacktail. Except I've rifle hunted blacktail all the way until now. I just wanted to try archery for blacktail. I thought maybe having October off would be a better rhythm for my family, because now I'll hunt in September, but then I'll get the late season for a few units at the end of November as well to try for a buck.
Yeah.
But the other thing that's unique is I have a tree stand and permission on a little piece of private in the valley.
Oh, nice.
So I'm going to be going full-on Michigan-style whitetail hunter, and I'm going to, see what that's all about. Take the first forky that walks by.
Yeah, I like that idea. I mentioned that Kyler and I did a podcast a while back, and I mentioned to him that one of my most successful hunters I know hunts from a tree stand.
Oh, yeah.
And he's just very patient, and he used to rifle hunt from a tree stand, believe it or not, when he first got started, and he killed a lot of big blacktail with a rifle. And he said
Probably
he'd watch
that like end of the season rut time.
Well, he'd watch other hunters pushing deer down below him that they never saw. So because it's so thick over here in the valley.
All do it.
Yeah, and then we're not very patient a lot of times, and so he'd sit up there and he'd get nice big blacktail every year. He transitioned to archery hunting probably, I don't know, he would know, but 15 years ago, I would say.
Oh, okay, yeah.
But now he, focuses on that, but does really well with those self-climbing tree stands.
Yeah, I'm excited for the fact that it's on private, as I can just put a ladder up and leave it up there and none of the neighbors hunt. It's just one of those things where I could potentially have a easy season, and I didn't get any meat last year, which those of you who listen to my podcast know about the horror story of my archery elk season. So I won't need to go into details on that.
What episode number is that? Because that's a really good one to listen to.
It's a bonus episode. I'm actually going to re-release it coming before archery season. I think next week is when I'm throwing that up there. So
the little teaser on that, Bryant goes through the agony of his first kind of archery elk.
My very first archery elk,
arrow launch that didn't go quite as planned. So I won't give too much away, but it's definitely worth listening to. He does a really good job telling the story.
A lot of lessons learned. That's actually our most popular episode, and it was just me telling a story,
Well, and I know when you talk to the guys at Born and Raised, they were saying how their videos that show their failures are more popular than the ones that and I think it's the same because we're all human and we're all making mistakes in this hunting space that we all love, but we can learn from each other. And guys always want to talk about the wins and not always the losses, but we've all had both. So
I'll be. What was the question that brought us into that?
I don't know. Let me think.
Anyway, archery season's coming, and so I'll be trying to tree stand hunt for blacktail. And my wife told me to just go ahead and take the first buck I see because I need meat. We need meat as a family. So it's a meat tag this year, and we're gonna try having October off because I've always hunted the October rifle season for blacktail and see if it's a new rhythm for the family. And maybe I'll be an archery hunter from now on. But I do love the rifle blacktail season's near and dear in my heart. So that'll always be a part of something. I'll be taking other people out for sure.
I'm trying to figure out what I want to do. So my son has tags for the first time this year. But he got an Eastern Oregon tag, and then he got a youth tag.
You got a mule deer tag?
Yeah, so mule deer and a blacktail tag.
Oh.
Because it's a youth hunt over here. And then, but the challenge is these fires we've got going on. So,
what
if those
you don't need to say the unit, but is it one of the burning ones?
Yeah. So it's and where these fires are pretty close to our hunting spot, and so if those fires don't get contained to a level where they reopen the forest, we're gonna be because right now it's closed. So the guys that got the antelope tag, they're out of luck, and they can. I think ODFW said you can get your points back.
So what they do is they wait until the season's over, and then they assess if the hunter truly had no opportunity. But even if they had a handful of days of opportunity, you won't get your points back. But if they decide that you truly did not have an opportunity to hunt, they'll reinstate your points +1 and give you your money back. But that rarely happens because usually by the end of whatever season, you get at least a handful of days to hunt, and they say that's your opportunity.
And there's other like BLM ground and other things that are still open, so it's just
and they'll count. They'll say, well, that's where you get to hunt. That's in your unit,
Yeah, and that's frustrating for especially a youth on his first time out. So we'll see. We'll see how that plays. Hopefully, we get some rain in September and everything's good to go by October.
What month is it's October.
So that's October. I've got a general season archery elk tag in my pocket. So I'll be hunting the elk with that, and then I haven't decided if I'm going to go archery blacktail or rifle blacktail yet.
Yeah.
And I mean, now it's technically any weapon. It's just what season do you want to hunt in?
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, you could use your bow for rifle for sure, and shoot some of those backyard bucks you've been telling me about.
Yeah, that's possible too. My neighbors don't love that. But
yeah.
And it doesn't feel as authentic, but again, meat in the freezer. So I got a mule deer last year and he's already been eaten. Mm-hmm. So I've eaten every bit except for a little bit of sausage.
Yep.
And it's amazing how, and I feel like I try to savor it, and I only eat venison on the weekends, but I still go through it. You know?
And that's the difference between getting an elk or a deer. I mean, the elk, that'll last you quite a while, family of 4, but a deer, you just kind of eat through it.
Yeah, and the elk that I've only ever taken one elk, and I gave so much of that away.
Oh, yeah.
Just because I thought I had this unlimited amount of meat, and that was sort of a mistake as well. But
yeah, been there with even with deer. When someone helps me on a nasty pack out, I'll give them a whole quarter just because it's like, I did that. My buddy Jericho helped me pack out a buck from the opposite side of a canyon, so we had to go down the canyon and back out, and he was sick when he came to help, so he earned a quarter, but
and I've met Jericho. He's a nice guy. He deserved it.
He'll do that anytime.
So I don't know if you saw Wayne Endicott's post. It was a while back, but he was talking about deer populations in the Steens. Did you catch that one?
I tried to watch the whole thing, but then my phone timed out, but I saw like the first 10 minutes of it.
Yeah, so Wayne just he did a hike in there, and he was talking about how the numbers were just way down, and we're not going to fix politics, and we're not going to control predators. So basically limiting tags was his only solution, is where he got to it, which he was hesitant to talk about. But for the Steens to be what it is now versus what it used to be when he was a kid, he's just seen drastic changes. And he talked about how, that breeding population of bucks, they get pretty beat up and they can only service about 25 does, and then they can't keep going.
And they say that same figure for blacktail is what I've heard as well.
Well, I wanted to get your opinion because it's something we talk about on this show quite a bit, and I know you stay informed and you're paying attention to things. But what do you think about like a 3-pointer better rather than limiting tags? And I'm not saying you adopt it statewide, but you pick certain units that you're trying to grow up and get healthier. Switch those to a 3-pointer better.
Well, I think that the Steens unit is or was already a 3-point or better tag. At least I'm pretty sure that's what, when I was reading through the comments of, the post you're talking about from Wayne Endicott, he responded to a couple people who said, how about a point limit? And he said, well, there's already been a point
They've already
limit.
tried that.
Yeah, which there's been times in Oregon's history, like even for blacktail, where there was a point limit like that, 3-point or better. For years and years, you remember it was always a fork or better. And then last couple years, they've opened it up to spike or better. And then they moved the season back a week, so now rifle hunters can shoot spikes and are hunting in the prime rut season. So this is all fresh news. Like, we got to see how that dynamic is going to impact blacktail.
I'm not worried about blacktail. From what I've seen, blacktail are doing pretty good. There's a lot of them. I'm
not worried about blacktail. No, I'm not. But what am I trying to say here? I'm not worried about blacktail. I don't think they're going to go extinct. I don't think they're anywhere near imperiled. But I do think that we can change the dynamic of the population. And, the days of giant bucks might be behind us.
Yeah.
Also, there's more rifle hunters than there ever has been. At least when every year I look at the total number, and you might need to correct this. I think it was 197,000 rifle blacktail or general season hunters, which...
That's a big number.
Holy cow, yeah, right?
Yeah.
Now that I say it out loud, it might have been 97,000, which is a big difference.
But either way, both big numbers.
Sure.
And you look at, to me, how many of them were successful, but with that season going into the rut, that's a pretty good opportunity for you to harvest a blacktail. And a lot of people...
Some of the units on the general tag for blacktail had like a 25% or more success rate, which is really high for a tag. Yeah. When you look across nationwide at some of the areas that... a lot of deer are killed, a lot of whitetail, across the country. some of them are 25 to 35, and those are like the best sought after tags. Average for, most tags is 10%. So our blacktail success rates are really high compared to other areas.
Well, and I think a lot of people grew up doing it.
Yeah.
They've learned it really well, then they've taught their friends, and it just kind of has made really
accessible.
skilled. Yeah, very skilled hunters.
You can road hunt blacktail. I've heard you can road hunt mule deer even easier, because supposedly they will run away for a second and then turn back and give you a shot every time.
Mule deer always give you that look back.
Yeah.
So even if you're not on the road and you're just chasing them hillside to hillside, and let's say you bumped them out of their bed, before they crest that next hill, they always give you that look back opportunity.
Yeah. And I've had blacktail do that, but way more seldom. Plus the brush is so thick, they move 10 feet and they're invisible.
And they're gone. I've blacktail hunted and seen a buck 15 yards in the road in front of me.
Yeah.
Dip down into something and never saw him again,
Yeah, so like you said, I'm not going to pretend to be some sort of a blacktail expert biology, but I do listen to a lot of media, and I read all the studies that OSU puts out, all the blacktail studies they do all the time. And, I'm not worried about the population. I appreciate the fact that there's more opportunity. I think that that's overall a good thing, but there's just something inside of me. Maybe it's my selfish human nature that wishes we weren't allowed to shoot spikes, or that wishes it was a little harder. And that might be from me coming from a place of I've always fought really hard to get a buck. One season I hunted 23 days on the general Western tag to get my buck, and it's just like on public land, and trying to drive within 30 to 45 minutes from my house on public land. I live in Salem, like hunted hard areas, and trying to fill tags. Like, I like the challenge of it, and not that adding a week to season and making it spike made it too much easier, but I've passed up on a lot of spikes, and someone who doesn't really care or just wants to kill whatever they see, kind of that bloodthirsty thing, who kills spikes. Like, I don't know. I kind of wish they weren't allowed to, but, to each person, they have their own style and standards.
Yeah, it's hard to know the right answers to stuff like that.
Yeah.
I think the more I've matured as a hunter, I'd rather not fill a tag and try to take a more mature animal just because you get more meat. I mean, that's where my mindset is.
Yeah,
and let them grow up a little bit. There's not as much challenge.
The biggest buck that I've killed was a valley buck, and he was a 3x3, decent 3x3, but he had pounds and pounds more meat than the fork that I shot the year before that, So just holding out, like shooting a spike, I've never done, but I can't imagine how small they must be, body size.
Yeah, it's just getting a lot less meat.
The other theory that I've heard that you might put in conspiracy theory territory, I'm not going to get to the whole, like, they're trying to take away hunters' rights, but that bucks revert. And so there's this worry that there's a bunch of old breeding bucks with bad genetics that are spike only that will never go past a spike. And so supposedly the theory is that they wanted to remove those genetics from the population. And so then we'll lose the spike hunt soon.
Oh.
But, I've never heard that from a credible source. That's just people coming up with ideas.
I mean, I've seen some old reverted fork and horns before for sure.
Yeah.
Not as much as spikes.
Yeah.
I've got some spikes in my neighborhood. We call them goat bucks because they have literally these little pinkies that go straight back on their head. Oh. And they don't even look like, it's not up in the air. It's just.
Oh, I've seen that. Yeah, they're like swept back.
Yeah, they're just goofy looking.
But they have those every year?
Well, I see a couple of those bucks every year in the neighborhood.
So you don't know if they're new ones or if they're the same ones?
Yeah, I think they're new ones. I think they're brand new because they're kind of young and dumb. And then I think those turn into 3 points. I mean, that's all I've always said. Spikes typically become 3 points is what I've always thought.
And what makes you say that?
I don't know. I don't know how that got in my head, but it was like, okay, if it's a spike the first year, it's going to be a 3 point the next year and then a 5 point the next. Like an odd number thing or something. Odd numbers, okay. Yeah, and then if it's a fork and horn, it's a 4 point. And I don't know, I don't think there's any science behind that, but that's what my brain has always said.
All right. Well, you do you. Yeah. Well, but it's funny to say all that, putting limitations on yourself. Like, I was raised in the fork or better culture. And so that's like how I'm still hunting, and I don't want to shoot a spike. So maybe most of the hunters are like me and they're not going to shoot spikes. And then the people who are going to shoot spikes are kids or seniors or people with disabilities. I don't know. That's probably not the case, but that could be a nice way to look at it if you're trying to justify being able to shoot spikes.
Yeah, giving opportunity to more people. When I was a kid, we had a slaughter hunt. I don't know if you came in during that time or not, but we were at the end of season the last week. You could kill a buck or a doe.
Oh,
with a general Western Oregon tag.
In any unit?
Yeah.
With youth or?
No, just a general Western tag. Had the last week was called a slaughter hunt, and so people would shoot does generally. And
for the whole last week.
I think it was the last week or the last few days.
Which, in my mind, shooting a doe, isn't really that big of a problem, especially, like, you think about how many blacktail we have, dude. We've got, at least in our part of the state, I know there's other parts of the states that can't really say the same, but we've got some thick deer numbers, especially around rural areas like farming areas or even cities where edges of cities. We've got a lot of deer, and I mean, shooting does is the only way to control the population.
Yeah.
That's why we can shoot all the bucks we want, and we still have deer, because it takes one buck to breed 25 does.
Well, and here's the other piece to nature that I really appreciate is how robust it is, because in that, you could back away for even a couple of years and just not hunt an area, and it would just explode again.
Yeah.
It recovers so quickly. Not to say that
it's exponential growth.
Yeah.
Literally, that's when you look at a population dynamic, it is exponential growth.
Not that we should be careless about it and just say, "Oh, shoot them, don't worry about it."
Yeah.
But I think when we look at some of these other management ideas, like the Steens unit as an example, if you just backed away even for a couple of seasons, you would probably see amazing recovery.
Yeah, so long as there's the right amount of food and there's not too much other predator pressure that's going to limit the population. If all the conditions are right, then you're correct in that, then the populations are going to blow up.
Yeah, and to me, as hunters and outdoorsmen, if we knew it would help, let's say you grew up hunting a particular area, I think you would be willing to gladly pay your fees to keep everything going and give nature a year off.
Yeah.
I think most of us would, if we knew it would actually help.
Yeah, and I'm one of the individuals who I do trust the Oregon Department of Fish and Wildlife, and I support the biology and the studies, and I think it's really important to know, not just guess or go off of like hunters' gut feelings about how many deer are where, but to actually have the studies backing it, which at blacktail are impossible to count because they're so reclusive and nocturnal. But all that to say is there's a lot of people who, to your point, would say, no, absolutely not, because the ODF&W doesn't know what they're doing, and they're just going to hurt everything. We shouldn't give them our money. I'm more in support of them as far as I think that they have the best intentions and that they don't want animals to go extinct. And a lot of the people who work for the ODF&W are hunters. Yeah. So why would they be shooting themselves in the foot?
Yeah, I feel the same way. I feel that they're doing the best they can to manage the resource. It's very complicated to manage, and you have a lot of different humans that have a lot of different opinions that you're trying to keep happy. So.
And so it's like, if you're someone who is really ticked off that Sam and I are saying this right now, you idiots, the ODF&W is trying to screw us all over. Well, then let your voice be heard. Do something about it. Say something, and quit just complaining and being all grumpy about it.
Yeah, and the politics of all that stuff, like the wolf reintroductions, and then they reintroduced grizzlies in Washington. I don't know how I feel about some of those things, because you're putting more apex predators into the system that's already got some challenges.
Yeah.
But I also, as far as just general management, I don't have a whole lot of criticism, because I don't know why they do what they do. And I kind of, not that I go in with blind trust, but I do have a bit of faith that they're doing the best they can with what they feel is the best for our state.
Yeah, and when I'm reminded that there are hunters who work for ODFW, they might not all be hunters, and we know that not all of them are. And I've met some fish checkers that I'm thinking, you're probably sad these salmon are dying, aren't you? But it's like they generally you have to assume that they got into that line of work because they care about managing wildlife, and the way that we manage wildlife is through hunting, and that's how we pay for wildlife. And so to your point, I'm happy to pay for tags and licenses, but I also don't want to see them get too expensive, and I was shocked because I always butcher my own animals, but I saw a post recently of someone lining up their 2024 prices for wild game butchering. It was $250 for a black-tailed deer, just the base price, not including burger or sausage or jerky.
Wow.
And so I was thinking, man, talk about a barrier to entry. So someone has to spend all this money on their tags, spend all this money on not taxidermy, butchering. You're looking at over $300 just for that.
Yeah.
If you're lucky enough to get one. So, I mean, for that reason, I really hope that we can stabilize tag prices and they maintain a level that they're at. But I'm okay with paying for them where they are.
Yeah, but I think hunting in general should be accessible to every man. That
Sure.
whole, the general mass that wants to should be within a budget that's reasonable. That's how I feel. It needs to be affordable for everybody.
There are some massive untapped realms in Oregon for hunting. I'm talking about small game like squirrel hunting. I've had a heck of a time trying to find squirrel hunters. There's not very many of them here in Oregon. There's a whole world of things that, bullfrogs. People probably would think it's gross, don't want to eat bullfrog legs. Well, guess what? Or people don't want to eat squirrels. There's half the country. It's a common food, They eat squirrels and bullfrogs all the time. And it's like, sure, you can't really compare bullfrog hunting to deer hunting, right? And the meat's different or whatever. But squirrel hunting is a great way to get into it, and it's an untapped resource. There's a ton of it. So, to say that you want hunting to be available to everyone, that doesn't necessarily mean that everyone should be able to kill an elk. If everyone did kill an elk, there probably wouldn't be very many elk left.
True.
But that's why we have, for one, limited tags, which sucks. And there's a whole debate to be had about whether or not that was the right move for Eastern Oregon to go limited entry only on elk tags. But then there's a certain success rate that we are able to operate at as a population of hunters. So as long as that maintains the same, we should have the same opportunity. But imagine if everyone filled their tag in 1 year. That would decimate the population.
And I do think as hunters, we have to pay attention to that because technology, cartridges, all these things have given us the advantage where we can take animals from a lot further away. And so those success rates are going to keep going up.
Yeah.
And popularity in hunting and controlling your own food source has become a thing. And so a lot of people like that organic wild meat. Let's shift gears a little bit and just talk about the spiritual connection to the outdoors. So
sure.
I was at a, what do they call it? It's not a funeral, but it's a celebration of life yesterday. And I don't know why.
Graduation ceremony.
Yeah, exactly. Graduation to heaven. I like that. And it was really neat. This gentleman had this huge impact on a lot of people. And he took them on adventures. And they weren't adventures that cost money necessarily, but he took folks that maybe couldn't even afford gas or had no idea of where to go. And he took folks to go look at wildflowers and go look for rocks and just have these different adventures. And I started thinking about it, and he just appreciated, sunsets and the sky and just the beauty that was all around him. And I didn't know him that well, but all these people were describing how he really showed them how beautiful all these things around them were.
Yeah.
And I just thought, man, that's just another way to really appreciate nature without having to harvest. Because I think oftentimes we always talk about the harvest and how we love the meat and all that.
Yeah.
But I think if we really boil it down, and I know I've talked about it before and you probably have too, the reality of just being out there in God's creation and what that does for you internally.
Yeah.
And I just, I know that's a big part of your story and why you do what you do. So, share with us a little bit about kind of just some of the things you've encountered or what keeps driving you, what your drive is behind being out in nature.
Well, from all the conversations I've had with so many different people who live in the outdoor space, you know, whether it's professionally or they're just like me, they just love to hunt and fish. You can't escape the sense that there's something bigger than you out there. Even just watching the sunset over the mountains, or even just seeing the mountains, you become aware of how small you are in the grand scheme of existence. And what that does is it causes this connection in our brains when we realize, oh my gosh, I'm not the most important thing in the world. I'm not the biggest thing in the world. I can't even perceive the world. It's so big. And then you start to wonder, well, is that really it? Is there something more out there? Like I'm getting this sense right now that it's not just me in the world alone, but that this thing that's so much bigger than me, that is the world, is reflective of a creator. And that's what I've based my whole ministry on, is helping to connect those dots. And maybe someone listening to this, especially if they're not a believer, they might have sensed that but not been able to quite put words to what they were feeling. Or maybe they're so hyper focused on trying to kill something that they're just not giving themselves the time to really process it. But anyone who really gives it the thought that it deserves of, what does this mean, this feeling and this sense that I'm getting of my place in the universe, it means that you are not the end-all be-all, that there's something so much bigger than you. And then you begin to question of like, well, what is this that I'm sensing? Is it just the universe? And there's a lot of people who put that word to it. The universe is speaking to me. Or this sort of different type of spirituality that is like, very, very loose and based on what you can sense and what you can feel. But the reason I'm here on this earth is to help people see that the spiritual being that you are just kind of loosely sensing and getting an idea of in your life in the outdoors, the thing that a lot of people will call nature or the universe, it's actually has a name, and it has revealed himself in a very specific way and wants that connection with you as the creator. And when you strip away everything inside of you, your desire for success, your pursuit of prosperity, all the stressors of your life, seeking relationships, seeking this, seeking that, everything that you do, if you strip it away in total silence, you will find within yourself a desire to connect with your creator. That is the fundamental human desire inside of all of us. And you sensing that creator exists when you're in the outdoors is the beginning of that journey. And then you begin to explore. Maybe you try praying, maybe you try this or that, but you start to realize that this God has revealed himself in a specific way. And, that's the whole emphasis of my podcast, is I talk to people who are really respected in the outdoor space. And I ask them those questions, like, what's your spiritual connection to the life in the outdoors? And whether they're a Christian or not, it always comes back to this idea of, I sense something more than me out there.
Yeah.
And, that's what I'm doing with that is creating avenues to help people see, look within yourself. You have a longing for a connection to your source, to your creator.
Yeah, really well said. Thank you for that. I threw you on the spot. We didn't pre-plan anything for today, and I just was being quiet and listening because that was good. Thank you. Yeah, no, and it's, God is there for all of us at any point in time. It's like there's this, we're so close we can almost touch it, but we keep ourselves so far away for no reason. You know, and it doesn't we get blinded by all the things that we think are important, which is making money and paying bills and
being successful.
Yeah. And we get our mindset so focused on all those things that it just blocks, it clogs the filter, if you will, to God. And I think when you're out in nature, like you said, you strip all that away and you actually are like, whoa, we recently just got back from a trip, my family and I, and we went to a bee place that raised bees for honey.
Yeah.
And we learned so much about bees that I had no idea. And you may know some of these things, but, that the queen bee, she only breeds one time in her life. And she goes up in the air, and about 20 different male bees put enough sperm in her to last her entire time as a queen bee. And she'll live 3 to 5 years with that same sperm sac, if you will, to fertilize all those eggs that she produces all the time. Those males, those 20 plus males, all die right after breeding with her.
Yeah, they like fall out of the sky.
They explode. They basically explode their internal, organs.
Yeah.
But it's just, to me, like some of those unique little things you could pick any species you want and examine them under a microscope and see how perfectly made and how they're designed to do what they do. Yeah. And it's just awe-inspiring to me. And like this celebration of life, thinking about going out and looking at wildflowers, I was like, man, if you really took the time and you had, a really nice camera or whatever, and you're taking these close-up, floral photos, for example, you would probably see some beautiful, amazing things that you had no idea were sitting in front of you. Yeah. Where most people are walking right by that flower. Yeah.
And I kind of like jumped above that with talking about the grandeur of everything, but you narrow down on, like you're saying, the smallest things, and you see it there. Or even just the transitions of the seasons, and you see sticks, twigs, blossom and bud and create flowers and leaves, and we see these systems in place, these natural systems, and it all points toward a creator. And that's what we see out there. And, as evidence to what you were saying, that we pursue success in place of looking for fulfillment that can only be found in connecting with our creator. Any listener, I want you to think of something in your life that you really wanted, something that you really lusted for. Maybe it's like the newest gun. You just were hyper fixated on it. You were researching it 24/7, reading forums about it, making all these decisions, going to gun shops, looking for it. You just wanted that thing so bad, and you felt like that's all you could think about. I just want that thing. It's what you spent your free time thinking about. Then you got it. How quickly did it become normal to you? It's just a thing. You just have it. It lives in the gun safe. You use it once a year for hunting. It's just a thing that you have now. Yeah. But then there's something that takes that place. And now it's like, if I had a new truck, I'd be so happy. And you just start obsessing over it. And for so many of us, especially in the hunting gear world, that's what it is. We're constantly seeking and obsessing over the newest thing. But if you stop yourself in your tracks, just remove that distraction from your life, remove your desires that you're pursuing, you'll realize that your truest, deepest longing and desire that you can't get rid of is for a connection with your creator. Yeah. And he's created an avenue. He's created a way. Like I said, he's not only given us a name to call him, which is amazing, but he has created a way for us to be in right relationship with him. And that's through Jesus Christ. Yeah. And so, that's all that I'll say on that here. But, maybe someone listening to this, they never thought of it that way. And hopefully, this can be another avenue that God is speaking and revealing himself to you. Maybe when you're in the woods this fall, you can be thinking about that and trying to be more sensitive to how the Creator is trying to communicate with you.
Yeah, I like the way you said that, because the distraction device of that consumer mentality of how, and all of us fall guilty to that. We all can chase that what's the next thing I need to get? And like you said, as soon as you acquire that possession, the shiny fades real quick. It's just like you buy the new car off the lot. Yeah, you buy the new car off the lot and you try to bring it back the next day. They're like, well, it'll be $10,000 cheaper, today.
So the buyer's remorse kicks in.
Yeah. So there's nothing real or tangible to that other than it gives you temporary enjoyment, right? Yeah. And without having a relationship with God and our Creator, we don't. There's nothing. There's no point in all this other stuff.
Yes. I can, with 100% confidence, say to every single person listening to this, the missing thing inside of you that you have been burying is a connection with God.
Yeah. Amen, brother. Well, I appreciate you sharing that. I mean, I know that was a deeper conversation than maybe you thought we were going to get, but that's the whole point. Like, to me, that's the reason that we do anything, and we get together and talk about that kind of stuff. And your words were beautiful. So I thank you for sharing them.
I love talking with you about this, Sam, because you get it, and for some reason, for some people, it's so hard to get, but like you really get it. And so I do appreciate our talks, even when we're out hunting or doing whatever we're doing. It's really refreshing.
Yeah, and I appreciate what you're doing. And, if people want to connect with you and follow you on your different media, what's the best way? I know you have a Facebook site.
Yep. Yeah, so right now, Salem First Hunting and Fishing Club is mostly a Facebook group. And so you can type that in, Salem First Hunting and Fishing Club. I really want to encourage you to join that just to see what we have going on. And I know we got into a big, scary conversation about God, but really this is just a way to connect with other hunters and fishermen in the Mid-Valley area from, Albany up to Newburgh, all around, these different areas. We have people coming from Beaverton and Portland we do duck hunting trips together. We do rifle sights, fishing trips, trap shooting. We try to get together, at least quarterly and make those great connections with people who also love the outdoors that live in your local area. And the other thing you can do, obviously, we're on like all the social media platforms. So Instagram, Facebook, whatever, you can follow us there at Oregon First Hunting and Fishing. So just to be clear, our podcast is Oregon First Hunting and Fishing. Our club is Salem First Hunting and Fishing. And we call it that because we put Oregon first and we only talk about Oregon. That's all that we care about.
Yeah. No, that's great. And he puts out a lot of good content. He's out there doing different things. And this guy's the stuff you're offering is free. There's not a cost involved.
No, we never charge, ever.
Yeah, he's just here to help and serve people and connect with people, other outdoorsmen. And I really respect the way he carries himself and who he's connected to and what he's doing. And so I really appreciate you taking the time to be here and just chat with me a little bit. One thing before we go.
Sure.
This is the burning question that's totally in the shallow end of the pool.
Okay.
So you had talked a while back on your show about going after a kokanee on Heg Lake.
Yep.
And I want to know if you have that planned or if that's one of your things you're working on.
Oh, man, that could be a part of the Oregon fishing tour.
That's what I was thinking.
I haven't gone back to that. So I've learned through some intel and video proof that there's also a sturgeon in Hag Lake. And I'm pretty sure it would be illegal to target that sturgeon.
Yeah.
But maybe I'll go fishing for some big catfish.
There you go. And you might bump into a sturgeon.
Yeah, to catch a kokanee in Hag, which that was a highly debated. I got a lot of hate mail for people saying, there's no kokanee in Hag Lake. Well,
I know you
that's
did.
what they used to stock back in the day. And it was a native one. It wasn't fin clipped or anything. And
I've just always been curious if you're going to go pursue that again because you have brought it up. Yeah.
I caught it in February of 2022. Okay. So, or 23, I mean. So, yeah.
So stay tuned. The kokanee will be caught at some point.
The Hag Lake kokanee.
Yeah.
And I will take it to a biologist and have them confirm that it is a kokanee from Henry Hag Lake.
He will also get it taxidermied.
Yep.
It'll be in his office.
Yep. And all those people that I blocked on social media that were total jerks about it, I'm going to unblock them and send them the video just out of pure spite.
Yeah. Well, you're cracking me up. But on a serious note, I do really appreciate you coming down to do this with me. And it's just good to reconnect with you. It's been too long.
Yeah,
so
for
thanks
sure.
a lot.
It was great talking to you, Sam.
Yeah, same to you. Thanks, Bryant.
All right. See ya.
Bye.